A poor girl watches a family eating at a luxurious restaurant. A young billionaire invites her to join them. Later, he steps away for a moment to get dessert, but when he returns, she's gone. She left only a note. "I pretended to be your daughter, and it was the happiest day of my life." He reads it and remembers the daughter he lost. He starts crying silently. Colton Mercer's fingers swirled his glass of red wine in absent motions. He had been sitting there for almost an hour, staring at the same spot on the restaurant wall. The host had stopped by 3 times to ask if he needed anything else. 3 times, Colton asked for just 5 more minutes. The dinner before him was getting cold, nearly untouched. The table was set for 1, just like all his tables had been for the past 12 months. Outside, the fall evening drew long shadows across the buildings in the city. The restaurant was on the 5th floor of a historic building, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a spectacular view. Lights, cars, people in motion, life happening out there. Inside Colton, however, time had been frozen for exactly 1 year. "Mr. Mercer, more wine." A waiter approached with a bottle. "No, thank you. Actually..." Colton hesitated, checking his watch. "Could you bring the check?" The waiter nodded discreetly and walked away. The table for one was crowded with expensive food he had barely touched. A waste. Like so many other things in his life now. That was when his gaze caught movement near the large window by his table. A small face appeared, framed by the night, watching the restaurant interior. It disappeared quickly when its owner realized someone had noticed. Colton frowned. That floor was too high for someone to be peering in from outside, unless... He leaned forward and managed to see there was a narrow decorative ledge running around the building, and somehow a child was out there. A girl. She reappeared, more cautiously this time. Her big eyes scanned the restaurant, passing over the elaborate dishes and the well-dressed patrons, until they finally fell on Colton's plate. He recognized that look. It was hunger. The child could not have been older than 8. Brown, disheveled hair and clothes a bit too large for her small frame. Through the glass, her eyes met Colton's. She didn't run away this time. Something strange happened inside him, an impulse he hadn't felt in a long time. Empathy, perhaps, or just the basic human need for connection he had buried along with his dreams. Without much thought, Colton raised his hand and motioned for her to come in. The girl's eyes went wide with surprise. She looked around, as if confirming he was truly signaling to her. Colton repeated the gesture, more firmly this time. She vanished from the window. Colton felt a pang of disappointment. What a crazy idea, calling an unknown child, probably in need, into one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. He shook his head, disappointed with himself. "Sir, your check." The waiter returned, interrupting his thoughts. "Thank you." He picked up his credit card when he heard a small commotion at the restaurant entrance. "You can't come in here like that, young lady." The host's voice sounded clearly irritated. "But that man over there called me," a child's voice replied. Colton turned around. It was her, the same girl from the window, now standing at the entrance, being politely but firmly escorted out by an employee. "Wait," Colton got to his feet. "She's with me." The host looked at him in disbelief. "Mr. Mercer, she's my guest." The words came out of his mouth naturally, surprising even himself. The employee let go of the girl's shoulder, confused but obedient. "As you wish, sir." The girl approached hesitantly. Up close, Colton saw that her clothes weren't just oversized, but also worn. Her face was clean, but her hair needed a good brushing. "Hi," she said when she reached the table. "You're the one who called me, right?" There was a mix of distrust and hope in her voice that hit Colton somewhere forgotten in his chest. "Yes, you looked..." He didn't want to say hungry and humiliate her. "Interested in the food." A shy smile appeared on the girl's face. "I've never seen food so fancy. It's like in the movies." Colton pointed to the empty chair in front of him. "Would you like to try it?" Instead of answering, she glanced around, clearly uncomfortable with the stares of other patrons. "Don't mind them," Colton said quietly, as if sharing a secret. "They're just jealous because your company is more interesting than theirs." That made her giggle. Without further hesitation, the girl sat down. "What's your name?" Colton asked, discreetly signaling the waiter to bring a new set of silverware. "Sadie," she replied, her eyes fixed on Colton's nearly untouched plate. "And you?" "Colton Mercer." "Colton," she repeated, testing the name. "Sounds like a cowboy name." For the first time in months, he felt like smiling. Never thought of it that way. The waiter arrived with new silverware and, sensing the situation, also brought a glass of juice. "Thank you," Sadie said, surprising Colton with her good manners. Once the waiter had left, Colton pushed his plate toward her. "Help yourself. It's filet mignon with red wine sauce and potatoes." Sadie picked up the fork carefully, as if it were a fragile jewel, and tried a small piece of the meat. Her eyes closed for a moment. "So good," she whispered, then remembered something and asked, "Are you sure you don't want any?" "I've had enough," Colton lied. "Go ahead." He watched her eat with controlled appetite. Despite the obvious hunger, she ate slowly, savoring each bite, using the utensils correctly. Someone had taught her well. "How did you get all the way up here?" Colton asked, genuinely curious. "This restaurant is on the 5th floor." Sadie finished chewing before replying, "There's a fire escape outside. I climbed up." "That's dangerous," Colton frowned. "I'm good at climbing things," she shrugged, as if it were nothing. "Mrs. Patel says I'm like a cat." "Mrs. Patel?" "My neighbor. She takes care of me sometimes." Sadie took another piece of meat. "Or used to." There was something in the way she said it, a tone of loss that resonated with Colton. "Do you live nearby?" Sadie chewed longer than necessary before responding, "Sort of." Instinctively, Colton knew he shouldn't press. There were secrets there, perhaps pain. He knew that territory well. "These potatoes taste different." She changed the subject, poking one of the roasted potatoes with her fork. "They're fondant potatoes. They're cooked in broth, then browned in butter." Sadie tilted her head. "How do you know all this?" "My wife loved to cook." The words came out before he could stop them. It was the first time he had spoken about Margot so naturally in months. "She doesn't love it anymore." A simple question, a complicated answer. "She isn't here anymore." Sadie lowered her fork slowly. Her eyes, surprisingly mature for her age, studied Colton. "My mom's gone too," she said simply. 5 words, a universe of shared understanding. The silence between them wasn't heavy, but filled with something Colton couldn't name. Recognition, maybe. "How about dessert?" he asked, breaking the moment. "They have an amazing pistachio ice cream here." Sadie's face lit up. "I've never had pistachio before." Colton signaled the waiter, who approached quickly. "Could we have 2 pistachio desserts, please? And maybe something to go?" The waiter nodded, giving Sadie a curious look before leaving. "To go?" Sadie asked. "I thought maybe you'd like to take something with you for later." She smiled, a genuine smile that lit her entire face. "Thank you." While they waited for dessert, Sadie looked at the large window beside them. The night was clear and a few stars were visible despite the city lights. "Did you know the stars we see might already be dead?" she asked suddenly. "Not all of them," Colton replied, surprised by the comment. "Some yes, because they're so far away that their light takes a long time to reach us, even after they've gone." "My mom taught me about the stars." Sadie kept her eyes on the sky. "She used to say that when people die, they become stars and keep watching over us." Colton felt a lump in his throat. "Your mother seems to have been a very wise person." "She was a teacher." Sadie turned to look at him. "Science teacher. She knew everything about the universe." "What else did she teach you?" Like an open floodgate, Sadie started talking about how her mother showed her constellations in the night sky, how they'd do simple experiments in the kitchen of their tiny apartment, how her mother read her bedtime stories every night, even when she was exhausted. Colton listened, genuinely interested. There was something captivating about how Sadie told her stories, with enthusiasm, but also a maturity beyond her years. The dessert arrived, interrupting the flow of memories. Sadie's eyes widened at the elaborate dish of ice cream, topped with caramelized pistachios and a delicate gold leaf. "Is that real gold?" she whispered. Edible, Colton confirmed. It doesn't really taste like anything. It's just for decoration. Sadie tried a spoonful and closed her eyes. It's the best thing I've ever tasted. While she savored her dessert, Colton watched her. There was something familiar about her that he couldn't pinpoint. Something in her gestures or the way she frowned when she was focused. She reminded him of someone, but he couldn't place who. You know, Sadie said between spoonfuls, my mom used to say things happen for a reason, even bad things. Do you believe that? She shrugged. Sometimes, like today, I wasn't supposed to be here, but I was hungry and saw all this food through the window, and then you saw me. I'm glad it happened, Colton replied, surprised to realize it was true. Me too. Sadie hesitated, fiddling with her spoon. Dad. The word fell between them like a stone in water. Waves of emotion hit Colton, surprise, confusion, and an inexplicable sense of belonging. Sadie realized what she had said and blushed. Sorry, I didn't... It's okay, Colton interrupted her gently. He didn't know why, but he didn't want her to feel bad about it. I don't mind. She smiled, relieved, and went back to her ice cream. The waiter returned with a to-go box and the check. Colton signed quickly. I need to use the restroom before we leave, he said. I'll be back in a minute. Finish your ice cream. Sadie nodded, focused on not wasting a single drop of dessert. In the restroom, Colton stared at his reflection. The man looking back at him seemed different from the one who had arrived at the restaurant 2 hours earlier. There was color in his face. His eyes looked more alive. A simple meal with a stranger's child, and something inside him had shifted. Thawed, perhaps. He splashed cold water on his face, trying to organize his thoughts. He needed to find out more about Sadie, where she lived, if anyone was taking care of her, if she needed help. When he returned to the table less than 5 minutes later, it was empty. The dessert plate was clean. The to-go box was gone, and in the spot where Sadie had been sitting, a folded napkin. Colton picked it up with trembling fingers. Inside, written in childlike scrawl with the pencil he always kept in his jacket pocket, was a message. I pretended to be your daughter. It was the happiest day of my life. He looked toward the window at the fire escape beyond it, into the now darker night. Sadie had disappeared, but something inside Colton Mercer, something that had been dead for an entire year, had just awakened. Colton turned the key in the ignition and silenced the car's engine. He remained seated, hands still on the wheel, watching the facade of the house through the windshield. 3 stories of red brick, large windows with closed curtains, and a small front yard that desperately needed care. The house he and Margot had chosen to start a family, a house that now echoed with emptiness. He got out of the car and climbed the front steps. Sadie's note burned in his pocket like an ember. Her words, I pretended to be your daughter, it was the happiest day of my life, had stuck in his mind the entire drive from the restaurant. Upon entering, Colton didn't turn on the lights. He knew every inch of the place, even in dimness. He left his keys on the hall table and headed upstairs slowly. On the 2nd floor, he passed his own bedroom, the office, the main bathroom, and stopped in front of the last door in the hallway. The door he hadn't opened in exactly 1 year. His heart pounded. His breathing was heavy. Colton rested his forehead against the cold wood and closed his eyes. It's just a room, he whispered to himself. But it wasn't just a room. It was her room. The room of the daughter he never got to know, of little Wren Mercer, who lived only a few minutes in this world before following her mother to wherever Margot had gone. How many times had he passed that door in the last weeks of the pregnancy, finding Margot organizing tiny clothes or adjusting the mobile above the crib? How many nights had they spent sitting on the floor of that room, dreaming of the future they would build together? Colton took the note out of his pocket and reread it. The childish, crooked handwriting held so much: loneliness, hope, and a longing so deep it broke through his defenses. In a decisive gesture, he turned the doorknob. The door opened with a faint creak of protest, as though the room itself was surprised by the intrusion after so long. The air inside was stale, loaded with memories and frozen expectations. Colton flipped the switch. The soft glow of a moon-shaped lamp illuminated the room. The walls were a pale yellow, hand-painted by Margot with tiny white stars forming real constellations. "I want our daughter to grow up looking at the universe," she had said while painting, her belly huge at 8 months pregnant. The light wooden crib still sat in the center, covered by a transparent canopy Margot had sewn. Next to it, a rocking chair with a folded blanket over the arm. A white dresser still held a basket of diapers, powder, and other items never used. Everything was exactly as Margot had left it, as if any moment she could walk through the door with Wren in her arms, smiling at him. Colton took 3 steps before his legs gave out. He slid down until he was sitting on the floor, leaning against the side of the crib. "I don't know why I came here," he said to the empty room, his voice sounding oddly loud in the silence. His eyes landed on a picture frame on the corner table, a photo of him and Margot, taken a week before the due date. She was beaming, one hand on her belly, the other entwined in his. Her reddish-brown hair fell in waves over her shoulders, and her green eyes shone with the promise of the future. Colton reached over and picked up the frame, running his fingers over her face. "I met a girl today," he spoke, feeling strange yet relieved to finally address Margot. "She's about the age we imagined for a big sister to Wren, remember?" Silence answered, but Colton continued. "She was looking through the restaurant window. Hungry, I invited her in." He let out a faint laugh. "She reminded me a bit of you, in a way. She has this way of looking at things like she's seeing beyond them." Colton unfolded the note again, smoothing it over his knee. "She called me Dad, Margot. Then she ran away. Left this." He held up the paper as if Margot could see it. "Why does this affect me so much? Why did a child I don't even know manage to open this? This thing I've kept locked up for so long." A tear slid down his cheek, followed by another and another. It wasn't the intense, devastating weeping of the first months after the loss. It was a quiet, almost peaceful cry. "I miss you every day," he confessed, voice trembling. "And I miss Wren too, even though I never got to know her. I miss the plans we made, the future we never had." Outside, the wind rustled the branches of a tree, casting dancing shadows across the star-filled walls. "I got lost, Margot. I thought I was moving on, getting back to routine and work, but I was just existing until today." Colton stood up slowly and walked to the window. He pulled aside the curtain and looked out at the quiet street below. Somewhere in the city, Sadie was probably sleeping, or maybe not. Maybe she was hungry again, or cold, or scared. "I have to find her," he decided, surprised by his own determination. "I don't know why, but I have to." He turned to the center of the room, taking in every detail with new eyes, not as a mausoleum for lost dreams, but as a reminder of how much love once existed here, how much love still existed, hidden beneath layers of pain. "What would you say, Margot?" "You'd tell me to follow this crazy feeling, this sense that I need to find this girl." He could almost hear her reply, that slightly teasing tone she used when he was being too cautious. "Since when did you need my permission to do the right thing, Colton Mercer?" A small smile, the first genuine one in a long time, touched his lips. "Yes, you'd say exactly that." He carefully folded the note and placed it in his pocket. He would leave the room, but not lock it this time, not with a key, not forever. Before leaving, Colton stopped at the door and took one last look at the empty crib, the starry walls, the photo of him with Margot. "I'm going to find her," he promised. "I don't know what I'll do afterward, but I'm going to find her." And for the first time in a year, when Colton Mercer left his daughter's room, he took more than just sorrow with him. He also carried a fragile but undeniable spark of hope. The next morning, Colton woke before his alarm. For the first time in months, he didn't feel that familiar reluctance to leave his bed. Instead, he got up with a sense of purpose, took a quick shower, and dressed in clothes more casual than his usual executive suit. The office could wait. Today, he had a different mission. As he brewed strong coffee, Colton planned mentally. He would start at the restaurant where he met Sadie, ask the staff, then expand his search to the surrounding streets. Someone had to know her. Someone must know where to find her. He picked up the note from the kitchen table, where he had left it the night before. "I pretended to be your daughter. It was the happiest day of my life." The words still stirred something deep in him. He placed it carefully in his wallet, On his way to the car, he took out his phone and called his secretary. "Janet, this is Colton. I'm not coming to the office today. Cancel my meetings." He paused. "Actually, can you clear my schedule for the rest of the week? I'm taking care of something personal." Janet, efficient as always, asked no questions. She just confirmed she would handle everything and wished him a good day. In 5 years working together, this was the first time Colton took unplanned days off. But something in him had changed, like a door unlocked after being sealed for years. Le Ciel was closed when Colton arrived, but a few staff members were already inside, preparing for lunch. He knocked on the glass door until a young waiter noticed him. "I'm sorry, sir, we don't open until noon," the young man said, opening the door just enough to speak. "I know, and I'm sorry to bother you." Colton took the note from his wallet. "I was here last night. A small girl, about 8, brown hair. She was with me. Did you see her?" The waiter frowned, thinking, "Oh, yeah, the little girl who came in through the window. Caused a fuss with the head waiter." "That's right. Do you know who she is or where I can find her?" "No, sir, sorry. I've never seen her before last night." Colton nodded, disappointed but not surprised. "Can I speak with the head waiter then?" "He'll be in at 11. I'll come back later." "Thank you." Leaving the restaurant, Colton began walking around the nearby streets. It was a commercial district, full of office buildings, upscale restaurants, and a few department stores. Not the sort of place you'd usually find a child alone, unless she had no other choice. He went into every establishment, showing the note and describing Sadie. He received puzzled looks, some pitying, others skeptical. Nobody knew her. Nobody had seen a girl living on the streets around there. By late morning, Colton returned to Le Ciel. The head waiter recognized him immediately. "Mr. Mercer, how may I help you? We don't have your reservation for today." "I'm not here to dine. I'm looking for the girl who was with me last night." The man straightened his bow tie, visibly uncomfortable. "Ah, yes. Quite an unusual situation. Have you seen her before? Maybe she hangs around the area." "No, never. And believe me, Mr. Mercer, I would have noticed. We have a very select clientele." The slightly snobbish tone irritated Colton. "She climbed the fire escape. Maybe she's done it before." The head waiter pursed his lips. "I doubt it. After last night's incident, I checked with our security. The fire escape door was unlocked. An oversight that's already been corrected." Colton thanked him and left, feeling more lost than before. For a moment, he considered giving up. What was he doing, anyway? Searching for a needle in a haystack, a child he'd met by chance, who might not even be in the area anymore. But then he remembered her eyes, how she'd called him Dad. The note? No. He couldn't give up. By the third day of searching, Colton's determination began drawing attention. The street vendors, the doormen of the buildings, the cab drivers waiting at taxi stands, they all recognized him and waved when he approached. "Still looking for your girl?" asked a man selling hot dogs on a busy corner. "She's not—" "Yes, I still am." The vendor smiled sympathetically. "I hope you find her, buddy. I'll keep an eye out." That night, returning home exhausted and dejected, Colton allowed himself to wonder, what if he found Sadie? Then what? She probably had family, someone to care for her. He couldn't just take her home like a lost puppy. But why had she written that being his daughter, even just pretending, was the happiest day of her life? Why had she run away afterward? Unanswered questions plagued him in restless sleep. On the 5th day, a Friday, the sky was heavy with dark clouds at dawn. The forecast warned of a strong storm later in the afternoon. Colton hesitated, looking out the window, but soon grabbed an umbrella and left the house. Today, he was determined to expand his search perimeter. He'd take the car and visit neighboring districts. Maybe Sadie didn't live so close to the restaurant. Maybe she just wandered around there because it offered better chances of finding food. He spent the morning driving slowly through the streets, stopping at parks, schools, shelters. He showed the note, described Sadie. Some people were kind, others too rushed to pay attention. At a homeless shelter, a social worker listened to his story with interest. "If this girl truly is on the streets, Mr. Mercer, She needs professional help, the woman said kindly but firmly. Why don't you leave your contact information? If someone matching her description shows up, I promise to call immediately. Colton thanked her and left his card, but walked away feeling empty. The thought of Sadie stuck in a bureaucratic system, cold and scared, deeply troubled him. Around 4 in the afternoon, the rain began. First a few isolated drops, then a steady, heavy downpour. Colton kept going, his umbrella offering little protection against the wind that threw water in every direction. The streets began to empty, people ran for shelter, car headlights turned on, and puddles formed on the uneven sidewalks. Despair weighed on him like the rain itself. That was when, passing a narrow alley between 2 old buildings, Colton heard something. A soft melody, nearly drowned out by rain hitting the asphalt. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. He stopped, his heart suddenly hammering. That childlike voice kept singing, shaky but sweet, the lullaby Margot used to hum while arranging the baby's room. Colton closed his umbrella and entered the alley. Narrow and dark, it was mostly used as a dumping area for nearby restaurants. Large garbage containers lined the space, creating small pockets of shadow. The voice came from behind the last container, up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. He moved closer slowly, trying not to make noise. He didn't want to scare her. And there she was, huddled in a small gap between the dumpster and the wall, shielded from the rain by a piece of folded cardboard. Sadie hugged her knees to her chest, her wet hair clinging to her face. She sang softly, as though the song were a shield against the cold and fear. Colton felt his chest tighten. Sadie! She stopped singing immediately. Her eyes, huge in her small face, locked onto him with a mix of fear and recognition. Mr. Colton. Yes, it's me. He crouched down slowly, keeping some distance so she wouldn't feel threatened. I've been looking for you. Sadie blinked, confused. Why? The question, so simple, caught Colton off guard. Indeed, why? What would he say to a child he barely knew, found by chance? The truth, he decided. Your note, he said, taking the folded paper from his wallet. It was a bit crumpled and damp from the rain, but still legible. I couldn't stop thinking about it. About you. Sadie lowered her gaze, embarrassed. Sorry. I shouldn't have written that. No. Don't apologize. It was... Colton hesitated, searching for the right words. It was important to me. Silence fell between them, filled only by the sound of falling rain. Sadie was visibly trembling, her thin clothes soaked through. You're freezing, Colton observed. How long have you been out here? She shrugged, a gesture that seemed to carry far more weight than any child should bear. A few nights, since Mrs. Patel was taken to the hospital. Your caretaker is in the hospital, Sadie shook her head. She wasn't really... She just let me sleep in the hallway of her building sometimes. When people realized I was there, they chased me off, but she told me I could come back the next night. What about your parents? Colton asked gently. Sadie's eyes filled with tears. Dad left a long time ago. Mum, her voice failed. Mum got really sick, then she was gone. Each word was like a punch to Colton's gut. When? 3 weeks ago. Sadie wiped her tears with a soaked sleeve, an effort in vain. We stayed in our apartment until the landlord threw our stuff out. I managed to save some clothes and my mom's favorite book. Colton inched closer, sheltering her with the umbrella he'd opened again. And there's no one else, no family, no one to look after you. It was just us. Sadie hugged her knees tighter. Mom always said we didn't need anyone else. Something in how she spoke, so adult yet so vulnerable, broke Colton's heart. I lost someone too, he said, almost without realizing. My wife, Margot, and my daughter. Sadie's eyes widened. You had a daughter? She didn't really get to live. She was born, but... The words caught in his throat. She and Margot died in childbirth a year ago. Is that why you looked so sad at the restaurant? Her straightforward, honest question surprised Colton. Yes, he admitted. That's why. Sadie studied him for a long moment. Then, to Colton's surprise, She reached out her small hand and touched his arm. "I'm sorry about your wife and daughter," she said with a sincerity only children can have. "My mum said sadness gets smaller when we share it." Colton didn't know how to respond. Instead, he asked, "Do you have anywhere to go right now, Sadie?" She shook her head. "What if—" Colton took a deep breath, knowing what he said next would change everything. "What if you came with me? I have a big house. You could stay there while we figure out what to do." Sadie frowned, wary. "Why? You don't even know me. Because you need help. And because—" Colton hesitated, then decided to be honest. "Ever since I met you, ever since I read your note, something changed in me. I felt I had to find you." "Like in my mom's book," Sadie murmured. "What book?" "The Star Girl. The main character loses someone she loves a lot. But then she finds a star that fell from the sky, and it changes everything." Colton gave a slight smile. "I guess so. Like the book." The rain fell harder now. Sadie looked up at the dark sky, then at Colton, a decision forming in her eyes. "Do you promise you won't leave me alone again?" The question, so filled with fear and hope, struck Colton like lightning. He couldn't lie. He didn't know what the future held, what complications might arise. There were laws, procedures, a whole bureaucracy he didn't understand. But he knew, with a certainty he hadn't felt in a long time, that he wouldn't abandon this child. "I promise," he said firmly, "I won't leave you alone." Sadie hesitated another moment, then pulled out a worn backpack hidden beneath the cardboard and stood. "All right, I'll go with you." Colton held out his hand and, after a brief hesitation, Sadie took it. Together they left the alley, protected by the umbrella, while the rain continued to pour around them. Two strangers bound by loss, walking towards something neither could name yet, but that for the first time in a long while felt like hope. "This is it," Colton said, stopping the car in front of the red brick house. Sadie looked out the window, her eyes widening at the three-story structure. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and the house seemed to emerge from the mist like a fairy tale castle. "You live here alone?" she asked, not taking her eyes off the facade. "Yes." Colton turned off the engine. "It's really too big for just one person." Sadie clutched her worn backpack to her chest. Inside were all that remained of her previous life: some clothes, her mother's favorite book, a broken music box, and a photo of the two of them at a park. "Shall we go in? You need to get dry." She nodded but didn't move, as if something kept her from leaving the car. "It's okay," Colton reassured her, noticing her hesitation. "You can change your mind any time you want." "It's not that," Sadie murmured. "It's just, what if I don't know how to behave? It's such a fancy house." Colton smiled. "There's no right or wrong way to behave. It's just a house." "But it's your house. And now it's yours too, for as long as you need it." His words seemed to give Sadie the courage she lacked. She unbuckled her seatbelt and opened the car door. Colton grabbed the umbrella and guided her to the entrance. The house was dark and silent when they entered. He flipped on the hall lights, revealing a spacious area with polished wooden floors and a staircase leading to the upper levels. Framed paintings hung on the walls, mostly landscapes in soft colors. "Wow," Sadie whispered, standing in the entryway, afraid to step farther and drip water on the spotless floor. "Come on in," Colton encouraged, closing the door. "First, let's get you some dry clothes." Sadie followed him quietly, her eyes roaming over every detail. The house was clean and organized, but there was something cold about it, like it lacked life. No personal photos, nothing out of place. "Wait here," Colton said, pointing to the living room sofa. "I'll grab a towel and see if I can find something for you to wear." While he went upstairs, Sadie remained standing, still hesitant to sit and get the furniture wet. She glanced around, curious. The living room was large, with tall windows draped in heavy curtains. A big brown leather couch faced a fireplace that looked unused. There were shelves filled with books, and a coffee table with neatly stacked magazines, but no sign that anyone actually lived there. It felt more like a movie set than a real home. Colton returned a few minutes later, carrying a fluffy towel and what appeared to be a grey sweatshirt. "Here," he said, handing her the towel. The guest bathroom is right there. You can dry off and change. I know it'll be big on you, but it's just for now. Sadie accepted the towel and sweatshirt, which she realized was actually one of his old t-shirts. Thank you. The guest bathroom was larger than the entire bathroom of the apartment she'd shared with her mother. It had gleaming white tiles, a marble sink, and unopened toiletries, as if nobody ever used it. Sadie dried herself and pulled on Colton's t-shirt, which reached almost to her knees. She folded her wet clothes as best she could and put them in her backpack. When she emerged from the bathroom, she smelled hot chocolate coming from the kitchen. She walked there barefoot, feeling the cold floor under her feet. The kitchen was even more impressive than the rest of the house, spacious, with white cabinets, marble countertops, and appliances that looked untouched. Colton stood with his back to her, stirring something in a pot on the stove. "Do you like hot chocolate?" he asked without turning around. "Yes," she answered, climbing onto one of the high stools around the kitchen island. "My wife used to make it with cinnamon and a pinch of chili powder," Colton continued, stirring. "She said it was her grandmother's recipe." "My mom used to put marshmallows in mine," Sadie commented. "When we had them." Colton nodded, understanding what she didn't say. He stayed silent for a moment, just stirring the chocolate. Then, as though coming to a decision, he opened a cabinet above the fridge and pulled out a box. "Lucky for you," he said with a small smile, showing her a package of marshmallows. "They might be a bit old, but they'll do." He placed 2 mugs on the counter and poured in the steaming chocolate. He dropped a few marshmallows into Sadie's cup and slid it toward her. "Careful, it's hot." Sadie cupped the mug with both hands, feeling its warmth spread through her still cold fingers. The sweet, comforting aroma reminded her of winter nights with her mother. The two of them huddled under their one good blanket, sharing a cup of hot chocolate as they read together. "It's good," she said after a cautious sip. They drank in silence for a few minutes. It wasn't entirely uncomfortable, but it was laden with unspoken questions and uncertainty. "Are you hungry?" Colton asked at last. Sadie shook her head. "Not really." "Are you sure I could make a sandwich or—" "The hot chocolate is enough. Thank you." Another pause. Colton glanced at the wall clock. It was nearly 9 at night. "I guess we need to figure out where you'll sleep," he said, sounding a bit uncomfortable. "I have several guest rooms, but none are really prepared. We'd need fresh sheets, pillows." "I can sleep on the couch," Sadie quickly offered. "I don't mind." Colton frowned, clearly unhappy with that idea. "No, not the couch. There's a comfy armchair in the hallway near my bedroom. It reclines, almost like a bed. We can use that for tonight, and tomorrow we'll set up a proper room for you." Sadie nodded, relieved she wouldn't have to be alone in a strange room. "The armchair sounds great." They finished their hot chocolate in a lighter silence. Colton washed the mugs while Sadie watched, noting how uneasy he seemed in his own kitchen, as though he rarely used it. "Let's go," he said, drying his hands. "I'll show you where the armchair is and grab a blanket." They climbed the stairs together, Sadie holding her backpack like a shield. The second-floor corridor was wide and with several doors. "My room's this one," Colton pointed to the last door on the right. "And here's the armchair." At the end of the hallway, close to his room but not directly across from it, there was a large, dark leather recliner. It looked comfortable, with wide arms and a footrest that popped out when tilted back. "I think this will do," Sadie said, her shoulders relaxing a little. Colton opened a built-in closet in the corridor and grabbed a soft blanket and a pillow. He arranged them on the recliner, trying to make it as cozy as possible. "The bathroom's right there," he indicated a door next to his bedroom. "There's a new toothbrush in the drawer and fresh towels in the cabinet. If you need anything during the night, just call me." Sadie nodded, sitting on the edge of the armchair. She looked small and vulnerable in that large, unfamiliar space. "Thank you," she said, so quietly Colton almost didn't hear. He hesitated, clearly unsure what to do next. Part of him wanted to comfort her, to say everything would be okay. Another part was terrified of the responsibility he had just taken on. "Good night, Sadie," he finally said. "Sleep well." "Good night, Colton." He gave a small smile and went into his bedroom, leaving the door slightly ajar. Perhaps so Sadie wouldn't feel completely alone, or maybe so he himself would hear if she needed anything. Sadie waited a few minutes before settling into the recliner. She opened her backpack and took out her mother's book, placing it under her pillow. Then she pulled out a small, crumpled photo and held it against her chest. "Good night, Mom," she whispered to the photograph. "I found a place to stay." Colton woke with a start in the middle of the night. For a moment, he was disoriented, not knowing what had disturbed his sleep. Then he heard it, a small sob coming from the hallway. He got up and went to the door. In the dimly lit corridor, illuminated only by a soft wall lamp, he saw Sadie curled up in the recliner, hugging her knees. She wasn't crying loudly, but her body trembled with muffled sobs. "Sadie," he called softly, not wanting to startle her. She lifted her face, quickly wiping away tears with the oversized t-shirt sleeve. "Sorry. I didn't mean to make noise." "It's okay." Colton approached and sat on the arm of the recliner. "Nightmare." Sadie shook her head. "Just memories." Colton understood. He knew all about those nights when memories felt sharper, more painful. Nights he woke up expecting Margot by his side, only to find empty space. "Do you want a glass of water? More hot chocolate?" "No, thanks." She hesitated, then asked, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why do you have a baby's room if your daughter—" She couldn't finish, realizing too late it might be a hurtful question, but Colton didn't seem offended. "We set it up before she was born. After Margot and Ren, after they were gone, I couldn't bring myself to change it. I couldn't even go in there for very long. Ren was her name. Yes, Ren-Elise Mercer." "That's pretty," Sadie said sincerely. "Like a bird." "Exactly." Colton smiled faintly. Margot loved bird watching. She said birds were free in ways humans could only dream of. They fell silent for a few moments, not a tense silence, but a shared one, as though both were remembering people who were no longer there. "I think you need a real bedroom," Colton said suddenly. "You can't keep sleeping on a recliner." "I really don't mind, I swear." "But I do." He sounded resolute. "Tomorrow, let's fix up a room for you. Maybe we can use Ren's room." Sadie's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" "I don't want to take her place." "You wouldn't be taking her place," Colton replied gently. I think it's time for that room to have a child in it, as it should have had." The next morning, after a simple breakfast, Colton admitted he wasn't very good in the kitchen. They opened the door to the room that had been closed for so long. Morning light filtered through the thin curtains, illuminating the yellow walls with hand-painted stars. "Wow," Sadie whispered, looking up. "It really does look like the sky." "Margot painted each constellation in the right place," Colton explained, feeling a familiar ache, but not as sharp this time. She wanted the baby to grow up knowing the stars. Sadie walked around the room, gently touching the crib, the dresser, the unused toys. "We can change everything," Colton said, watching her. "Wall color, furniture." "I like the stars," Sadie said quickly. "Can we keep them?" Colton smiled. "Of course. We'll keep the stars." Over the following days, they worked together to transform the room. Colton dismantled the crib, replacing it with a twin bed he found in the attic. They bought new sheets. Sadie chose a set with planets and a moon-shaped lamp. Sadie insisted on helping with the painting, and Colton didn't have the heart to refuse. The walls remained yellow, but a brighter, more vibrant shade she picked out. The stars were carefully preserved, though some needed touch-ups. "Look what I found," Colton said one afternoon while organizing the wardrobe. He held up a small teddy bear in a blue onesie. It was supposed to be Ren's first toy. Sadie took the teddy bear carefully, as though it was something precious. "She's so cute." "You can keep her if you want." Sadie looked at Colton, unsure. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." She examined the teddy bear for a moment, her fingers stroking the soft fabric. Then, almost shyly, she asked, "Could I call her Little Margot?" Colton felt something tighten in his chest, but it wasn't pain. It was something lighter, more like relief, as though a burden was finally being shared. "I think Margot would have loved that," he replied, smiling. That night, when Sadie slept in her new bed for the first time, holding little Margot close, Colton stood in the doorway for a moment, watching. The room that had represented only loss for so long now housed a new chance. The past still hurt and always would, but now there was also space for the present. And for the first time in a very long time, Colton allowed himself to think that maybe, just maybe, the future could be something to look forward to, not fear. Days once again found color in the red brick house. Mornings were no longer the time when Colton dragged himself out of bed, drank black coffee, and headed off for long hours of work. Now they featured oatmeal with fruit, debates about which cereal was better, and talks about the plans for the day. By the third week of Sadie's stay, a routine began to form. It wasn't formally planned or discussed, just something that happened naturally, like water finding its path. In the mornings, Colton woke up first. He made breakfast while Sadie was still asleep. Initially, it was just toast, but soon he ventured into pancake and waffle recipes he found online. They weren't perfect, often misshapen or stuck to the pan, but Sadie always insisted they tasted amazing. "I've never had such interesting pancakes," she remarked one morning, holding up a pancake shaped like an unknown country's map. "It's culinary art," Colton replied with mock seriousness, making her laugh. After breakfast, Colton took Sadie to the public library, where she spent a few hours reading while he worked on his laptop at a nearby table. He had drastically cut back his hours at the office, going in only for essential meetings. The rest of his work he did remotely, keeping Sadie close. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it worked for now. "Won't you get in trouble for missing work?" Sadie asked one day, watching him close the laptop earlier than usual. "I'm fortunate enough to be the boss," he replied with a half-smile. "Besides, I was working too much. That's not really living." Afternoons varied. Sometimes they ran errands together. Colton realized he knew nothing about children's clothing, and Sadie patiently guided him through stores. Other times they visited museums, parks, or just stayed home when it rained. It was on one of those rainy afternoons that their Friday ritual began. "Do you know how to make chocolate mousse?" Sadie asked, flipping through an old recipe book she'd found in the kitchen. Colton glanced over her shoulder at the page. "Never tried. Why?" "My mom used to make it every Friday." Sadie ran her finger over the recipe. "It was our way of celebrating the end of the week, even if the week wasn't great." That night, they made their first mousse together. It was a disaster. Colton over-whipped the egg whites until they were dry, and they forgot to grease the pan before pouring in the mixture. But the flavor was there, and when Sadie closed her eyes after the first spoonful, Colton saw a smile that blended memory with the present. After that, Fridays officially became Mousse Day. Their afternoon drawing sessions started by chance. Colton found a box of colored pencils in his office and gave them to Sadie, along with a sketch pad he wasn't using. Without much expectation, he sat beside her with his own pad, more for company than anything else. "What are you drawing?" Sadie asked, peeking at his paper. "Nothing special, just scribbles." "It looks like a dog." Colton looked at his abstract doodle and frowned. "A dog? Yes, look," Sadie pointed. "Here are the ears, and this looks like the snout." He tilted his head, trying to see what she saw. "I think you have a very good imagination." "Can we get a dog?" she asked suddenly. The question caught Colton off guard. It was the first time Sadie asked for anything for herself. "You like dogs?" "I've always wanted one." She lowered her eyes to her own drawing. "Mom said our apartment was too small." Colton thought for a moment. "Let's finish these drawings today, then we can talk about maybe getting a dog." She nodded, but her new energy showed in her pencil strokes. When they finished, Sadie asked to hang their drawings on the fridge. It was such a simple, normal thing, yet Colton almost forgot that just a month ago his fridge had been a bare, cold surface. Sunday story time began on the third weekend. After lunch, Colton found Sadie sitting in the living room armchair, absorbed in a book. "What are you reading?" he asked. "The Star Girl." Sadie showed him the worn cover. "It was my mom's favorite." Colton sat on the arm of the chair. "What's it about?" "A girl who loses her family but finds a star that fell from the sky. The star can't go back home, so they take care of each other." The parallel didn't escape Colton. Sounds like a good story. Want to hear some? Sadie offered, her voice hesitant. I'd love to. And so Sunday story time was born. Sometimes Sadie read to Colton, sometimes he read to her. Soon, they extended reading into a nightly routine, not just Sundays. Nights brought their own challenges. Both had nightmares. Sadie sometimes woke screaming for her mother, disoriented and scared. In the early nights, Colton would rush to her room uncertain of what to do, just holding her hand until she slept again. Sorry for waking you, she muttered one night, still trembling after a particularly intense nightmare. Don't worry about it, he replied, pulling the blanket up around her. I have nightmares too. About what? Colton hesitated, but chose honesty. About the day I lost Margot and Ren. About not being able to save them. Sadie reached out her small hand and took his. It's not your fault. I know. In my head, he tapped his temple, but here, he moved his hand to his chest. It's harder to believe. My mum said the heart is the last to understand things, Colton smiled. Your mum was a wise woman. After that night, whenever one of them had a nightmare, the other was there. When Colton woke up sweating and calling for Margot, he'd find Sadie standing at his door, holding little Margot against her chest. She wouldn't say anything, just come in and sit on the edge of the bed until his breathing steadied. One rainy Sunday, they were watching a movie in the living room when Sadie grew restless, running her hands through her hair repeatedly. What's wrong? Colton asked. My hair's a mess. I can't fix it by myself. Want me to try? She gave him a doubtful look. Do you know how to brush a girl's hair? No, he admitted. But I can learn. That afternoon, Colton watched 3 tutorials on YouTube before making his first attempt at a braid. The result was terrible. Loose strands everywhere, completely uneven. It looks like a bird's nest, Sadie remarked, looking in the mirror, but she was smiling. Practice makes perfect, Colton said with determination. Tomorrow I'll do better. And he did. Each day a little better than the last. In 2 weeks, he could manage a decent French braid, and by the end of the month, he was attempting more elaborate hairstyles. The house that once was just a place for Colton to sleep and store his things began feeling like a home. There were magnets on the fridge holding up drawings, shoes of different sizes at the entrance, a calendar in the kitchen where they wrote down activities, moose day, afternoon at the park, movie night. One random evening, while Colton braided Sadie's hair before bed, she said suddenly, I think my mom would be happy I'm here. Colton's fingers paused momentarily. Really? Yeah. Sadie fiddled with little Margot in her lap. She always said families are the people who make you feel safe. They don't have to be blood-related. Colton felt a knot in his throat. He finished the braid in silence, tying it with a colorful elastic. There, he said, his voice slightly hoarse. Looks nice. Sadie turned around and, for the first time, hugged him spontaneously. It was quick and slightly awkward, but completely genuine. Good night, Colton. Good night, Sadie. As she headed to her room, Colton realized maybe people really didn't have to share the same blood to be a family. Maybe all that was needed was the willingness to learn together, learn to make imperfect pancakes, to draw dogs that didn't look like dogs, to braid hair, and above all, to trust. He didn't know what the future would bring. He only knew that, for the first time in a very long time, he was excited to find out. The doorbell rang at 10 in the morning on a Tuesday. Colton straightened his navy blue tie and ran a hand through his hair before opening the door. It was the first time in weeks he'd worn formal clothes, and he felt strangely uncomfortable in his own suit. Mr. Mercer. I'm Lauren Wells, from Child Protective Services. The woman at the door looked to be in her 40s, dark hair tied in a simple bun, holding a folder of documents. Her face was kind, but her eyes missed nothing with their professional scrutiny. Please come in. Colton stepped aside, trying to keep his voice steady. Thank you for coming. He had been the one to contact social services. After a month with Sadie in his home, Colton realized they needed to make things official. As well as everything was going, they were in a legal gray area that could become complicated at any moment. Lauren entered, taking in the hallway with Sadie's drawings now hung on the walls. Nice artwork, she commented. Sadie made those. She's talented. And where is she now? In the kitchen, finishing breakfast. Colton hesitated. I explained you'd be coming today, but she's a bit nervous. Lauren nodded. That's normal. I'll do my best to keep her comfortable. In the kitchen, Sadie was sitting at the table, half-heartedly stirring a bowl of cereal. She had carefully chosen her outfit that morning, a simple but neat blue dress, and Colton had styled her hair in an elaborate braid. She looked small and vulnerable, and Colton's heart sank at the sight. Sadie, this is Mrs. Wells. She came to talk to us, like I explained. Sadie glanced up, cautious. Hello. Hello, Sadie. You can call me Lauren. The social worker smiled, taking a seat at the table. That's a very nice braid. Who did it? Colton, Sadie answered, somewhat surprised by the casual question. He learned it on YouTube. Lauren raised her eyebrows slightly at Colton. Impressive. A lot of practice, he shrugged, pouring coffee for the visitor. And a lot of mistakes at first. The initial tension broken, Lauren began explaining why she was there. She spoke directly to Sadie, in a gentle yet honest tone, about how the child protection system worked, why they needed to ensure she was well cared for, and the next steps. I'll need to ask some questions, and then I'd like to see the house, especially your room. Is that okay? Sadie looked at Colton, who nodded encouragingly. Okay. The questions started out simple. How was Sadie adjusting? Did she have enough clothes? Was she eating well? Had her education resumed? Then they grew more delicate. Sadie, can you tell me about your mother? The girl stiffened. What about her? When she passed away? And what happened afterward? Sadie took a deep breath, eyes fixed on the table. Almost 2 months ago, she'd been sick for a long time. Her voice faltered a bit. After that, we stayed in our apartment until the landlord made us leave. I had nowhere to go. No other relatives, aunts, grandparents. No, it was just the two of us. Lauren took notes on her clipboard. And your father? He left when I was a baby. I never met him. More notes. Colton watched in silence, wanting to intervene each time he saw Sadie's discomfort, but knowing this wasn't the time. How did you meet Mr. Mercer? Sadie looked at Colton, as if seeking help to explain something complicated. We met at a restaurant. He jumped in. I was dining alone, and Sadie, well, she was looking in through the window. I was hungry, Sadie added, lowering her eyes. I hadn't eaten properly in 2 days. Lauren's expression stayed neutral, but her pen scribbled faster on the clipboard. And then, they recounted the story, the shared meal, Sadie's note, Colton's search, the reunion in the rain. Mr. Mercer, I understand you acted with good intentions, but you must understand that taking in a minor without immediately notifying the authorities is quite irregular. I know. Colton kept his tone firm. That's why I contacted you. I want to do everything by the book now. You're aware that the legal process for guardianship is complex. There will be background checks, financial evaluations, interviews, regular home visits. I'm prepared for that. Lauren looked at Sadie. Would you like to keep living with Mr. Mercer? The question hung in the air for a moment. Sadie looked at Colton, then back at Lauren. Yes, she answered softly but firmly. This is my home now. Lauren offered a slight smile, then shifted back to her professional demeanor. Shall we take a tour of the house? As they showed each room, Lauren asked more questions, took in details, and made constant notes. When they reached Sadie's room, she lingered, examining the books, the clothes in the closet, the stars painted on the ceiling. This room was... she began to ask. My daughter's, yes, Colton finished. She and my wife died in childbirth a little over a year ago. Lauren nodded, her gaze softening slightly. I'm sorry. Back in the living room, Lauren had more questions about Sadie's future school, Colton's job and how he planned to balance responsibilities, his long-term plans. Some were easy. Others made Colton realize how many things he still hadn't considered. Mr. Mercer, let me be frank, Lauren said finally, closing her folder. I do have concerns about how this situation developed. Under normal circumstances, Sadie would have entered the foster system while we searched for relatives or a suitable substitute family. Sadie paled, instinctively moving closer to Colton. "However," Lauren went on, "it's already been quite some time, and it's clear there's a bond between you." She looked directly at Colton. "I'll recommend starting a process of temporary guardianship while we assess the possibility of adoption. But you must understand, there are no guarantees. The process is rigorous." "I understand," Colton replied, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. "We're willing to do whatever it takes." After Lauren left, promising to return in a few days with more paperwork, Sadie remained quiet, sitting on the couch with her arms crossed over her chest. "Are you okay?" Colton asked, sitting beside her. "What if they take me away?" Her voice was almost a whisper. "They won't," Colton said with more confidence than he felt. "I'll do everything I can so you can stay here, I promise." "But she said there are no guarantees." "Do you know why there are no guarantees?" Colton turned to her. "Because they have to be sure this is the best place for you, and we're going to show them it is." Sadie hesitated, then asked, "What if it's not?" The question took him by surprise. "What do you mean?" "What if you realize you don't really want a kid, that you were just being nice?" Colton drew a deep breath, searching for the right words. "Sadie, I didn't know how much I needed you until I found you. This house wasn't a home before you arrived. I wasn't whole." He took her small hands in his. "So don't worry. I'm not letting you slip away again, not a chance." For the first time since Lauren's visit, Sadie smiled, a small, genuine smile, and Colton knew, with a certainty he hadn't felt in a long time, he would fight with all his strength to keep that smile safe. Colton woke before his alarm. For a moment, he lay still, staring at the ceiling while awareness of the day ahead pressed on him like a concrete slab. May 18th. He had managed not to think about it in recent days, busy with guardianship forms for Sadie, visits from the social worker, the routine they were building together. But the calendar wouldn't let him forget. May 18th. The day Margot and Ren would have turned 1 year old, he got up mechanically, dressed, and went downstairs. The kitchen was still empty. Sadie usually woke up later. Normally, he'd make pancakes or waffles, set the table with colorful napkins, maybe cut some fruit. Today, he just boiled water and stared out the window, not really seeing anything. "Good morning," Sadie's cheerful voice sounded behind him. Colton turned, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Morning. Want cereal?" Sadie tilted her head, immediately sensing something was off. Over the past 2 months, she had learned to read Colton's moods with surprising accuracy. "Are you all right?" she asked, climbing onto one of the high kitchen stools. "Sure, just didn't sleep well." Colton placed a bowl and the cereal box in front of her. "Milk?" She nodded, still studying his face. "You seem sad." Colton poured the milk without replying. He wanted to say everything was fine, to keep up the normality they'd worked so hard to establish. But something in his throat felt blocked. "I have a meeting at the office today," he said finally, changing the subject. "Janet will stay with you this afternoon. Is that okay?" "Yes." Sadie started to eat her cereal, but her eyes stayed on Colton. "Is it an important meeting?" "Very," he lied. There was no meeting. He just needed a few hours alone to deal with the date in his own way. "I'll try not to be too late." Breakfast went on in silence. Colton sipping coffee he didn't taste, Sadie stirring her cereal more than eating it. When they finished, he called Janet, his secretary, who had watched Sadie a few times before and got along well with her. "Are you sure you don't want to tell me what's going on?" Sadie asked as he prepared to leave. For a moment, Colton hesitated. Maybe he should tell her, maybe Sadie would understand. But then he remembered how she'd been after the social worker's visit, afraid of being taken away, insecure. He couldn't burden her with his grief today. "It's fine," he repeated, helping her adjust her backpack. "Come on, I don't want you to be late to the library." After dropping Sadie off with Janet at the public library, Colton drove aimlessly for almost an hour. Eventually, he parked near a small, quiet park. He opened the glove compartment and removed an envelope he'd kept there for weeks. Inside was an ultrasound photo, the last one of Ren, taken a week before the due date. There was also a card Margot had written for her daughter, to be read on her first birthday. For our little Wren, on your first year of life, may you grow strong and kind, brave and compassionate. Know that you were wanted and loved from the very first moment. Mommy and Daddy will always be here for you, with all our love today and forever. Colton let the tears flow freely as he held the card. Margot's handwriting was elegant, with round letters dancing across the page. He could hear her voice reading those words. Imagine her giving the card to a 1-year-old Wren, maybe with a homemade cake and a small party. A reality that would never exist. He stayed there for hours, sometimes crying, sometimes just staring at the horizon. When his phone rang, it was almost late afternoon. "Colton," Janet's voice sounded worried. "Everything okay? Sadie's restless, asking when you'll be back?" "I'm sorry, I lost track of time," he replied, his voice hoarse. "I'm on my way." When he arrived at the library, Sadie ran over and hugged him tightly. "You took so long," she said, her voice muffled against his coat. "I'm sorry, the meeting ran late." He thanked Janet, who left with a concerned look. On the drive home, Sadie chatted about the book she'd read, about a dog she saw at the nearby park, about the science project Janet had helped her start. Colton answered with monosyllables, his mind still stuck in that alternate reality, the one with Margot and Wren. At home, Sadie kept trying to cheer him up. She showed him a drawing she'd made just for him. She offered to make sandwiches for dinner. She suggested watching his favorite movie together. Each kind gesture only made the heaviness in his chest grow. The guilt of building a new life while Margot and Wren would never have that chance. The guilt of not being fully present for Sadie. Not today. "I don't like the drawing," Sadie asked when he barely glanced at the paper she handed him. "It's nice," he replied automatically. "You didn't even look." Hurt filled her voice. "What did I do?" "Nothing, Sadie. It's not you." "Then why are you treating me like this? Why are you acting different?" "I'm not acting different," Colton snapped more harshly than he intended. "I just need some space today, okay?" Sadie took a step back as if slapped. "Space from me?" "That's not what I meant." He ran a hand over his face, exhausted. "Look, today's just a hard day for me, that's all." "Why? What's today?" "It's complicated." "I'm not stupid." Her voice rose, frustration mixed with fear. "I know something's wrong. Why won't you tell me?" "Because it's not your business." The words flew out before he could stop them, harsh and cutting. Sadie's eyes filled with tears. She grabbed the drawing from the floor, crumpling it in her fingers. "Sadie, wait, I didn't mean—" But she was already running to her room, slamming the door hard. Colton sank onto the sofa, face in his hands. How could he have been so foolish, so insensitive? This was exactly why he'd tried to hide what the day meant, to protect her. And now, he'd done the very thing he feared most, hurting her because of his own pain. He gave Sadie a few minutes before heading upstairs. He knocked softly on her door. "Sadie, can I come in?" No response, but the door wasn't locked. He opened it slowly. Sadie was sitting on the edge of the bed, hugging little Margot, tears staining her face. She looked away when she saw Colton. "I'm sorry," he said, sitting beside her but leaving a small gap. "I shouldn't have spoken to you like that." She said nothing. "Today," Colton drew a shaky breath, "today would have been Wren's first birthday." "My daughter," Sadie looked up, surprised. "Sometimes on days like this, the pain of losing her and Margot is worse, but that doesn't excuse how I treated you. You didn't do anything wrong." "I just wanted to make you happy," Sadie said in a small voice. "I noticed you were sad." "I know, and that shows how special you are." He gave a small smile. "You're actually the only good thing that's happened to me this whole past year." Sadie's tears fell again, but differently this time. "You—" She hesitated, swallowing a sob. "You won't send me away?" The question hit Colton like a punch. "Send you away?" "Back to the system, to the social worker." Sadie clung to the teddy bear. "When you get tired of me? When I'm too difficult?" "Never." The word came out like a solemn vow. "Never, Sadie. You're not something that can be returned. You're my family now." He opened his arms, and Sadie flung herself against his chest, crying openly. Colton held her tight, feeling his own tears return. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you about today," he said softly. "I thought I was protecting you, but I should have trusted you'd understand." Can we do something for Ren?" Sadie asked, her voice still trembling. "Like light a candle or send a balloon up in the sky?" Colton felt something inside him loosen, a knot he hadn't realized was there. "That's a beautiful idea," he said. "I think Ren would have loved having you as a big sister." Sadie smiled through her tears. "I would have taught her how to braid hair, and how to draw, and how to spot constellations." They stayed like that, holding each other and imagining a reality that would never be, yet finding comfort in sharing it. The ghost of guilt remained. Perhaps it always would. But now Colton didn't have to face it alone. "Sadie, it's almost time," Colton called from the bottom of the stairs, adjusting his emerald green tie for the third time in 5 minutes. Getting no response, he bounded up 2 steps at a time. Sadie's door was slightly ajar. He knocked gently before pushing it open. "Everything okay in here?" She was perched on the edge of the bed, already dressed in the aqua green dress they had picked out together for the occasion. Her hair was perfectly braided. Colton now fully mastered the skill, with a matching ribbon woven in. In her hands she held little Margot, absent-mindedly stroking the teddy bear's ears. "What if he says no?" Sadie's voice was barely above a whisper. Colton sat beside her, the mattress dipping slightly under his weight. "You mean the judge?" She nodded, eyes still on the teddy bear. "Sadie, look at me." He waited until she met his gaze. "We've done everything right. Lauren gave an excellent report. The lawyer says our chances are very good, but not 100%. Colton couldn't deny that. The last few weeks had been a roller coaster of emotions and bureaucracy, forms, interviews, psychological evaluations, background checks, proof of financial stability. Every step completed successfully, yet always with that lingering shadow of uncertainty. "No, not 100% eked," he admitted. "Very few things in life are, but we're closer than ever." "What if he asks why you want to adopt me? What will you say?" The question took him by surprise. In the 5 months since he found Sadie, this question had never been voiced so directly. "I'll tell him the truth." Colton took her small hands in his. "That ever since you came into my life, this house became a home again. That I've learned more from you about courage and resilience than in all my previous years combined. That I can't imagine my life without your stories, your drawings on the fridge, your questions about the stars." Sadie's eyes shone with tears she tried to hold back. "I'll tell him that, strange as it may sound, we found each other when we both needed it most, and that sometimes the family we build is stronger than the family we're born into." Sadie let out a shaky breath. "I think that will convince him." Colton smiled. "I hope so. Now, are those new shoes comfortable? It's going to be a long day." "They're fine." She got up, smoothing her dress. "Colton." "Yes. Thank you for everything." He felt a lump in his throat. "No, Sadie, thank you." The family court building was imposing, made of red brick and white columns. Inside, the marble hallways amplified every step, every whisper, creating an almost solemn atmosphere. Colton and Sadie waited on a polished wooden bench with their attorney Hortrand Gregory Paxton, a man in his 50s with a naturally serious expression but kind eyes. "Remember," Gregory explained for the 3rd time, "Judge Porter is fair but meticulous. He'll ask questions, maybe some tough ones. Answer honestly, without over-elaborating." Colton nodded, his hand firmly holding Sadie's. Lauren Wells, the social worker, joined them, her heels clicking on the corridor floor. "How are our 2 warriors?" she asked with an encouraging smile. "Nervous," Colton admitted. "That's normal, but I have good news. I spoke briefly with Judge Porter, and he's read my full report. He's quite impressed with your progress." Before they could continue, a bailiff appeared at the courtroom door. "Guardianship hearing for Sadie Morgan Mitchell. Parties, please step inside." Colton and Sadie rose. She looked even smaller among the adults in the imposing corridor. He crouched down to her eye level, a gesture that had become almost a ritual. "Remember what we always say, one step at a time." Sadie nodded, squeezing his hand with surprising strength for someone so small. The courtroom wasn't large, but to Sadie it felt huge. Judge Porter, a grey-haired man with thin-framed glasses, reviewed the documents before him as everyone settled. "Good morning," the judge said finally, peering over his glasses. "We're here to finalize the permanent guardianship process for Sadie Morgan Mitchell, requested by Mr. Colton James Mercer, correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Gregory confirmed. The judge adjusted his glasses. "Looking over the files, I see this situation started in an unusual manner." Colton felt a chill down his spine. Here it was, the moment he feared most, when the judge would question how Sadie had come to stay in his home. "Mr. Mercer, you found the minor living on the streets and brought her to your residence without immediately notifying the authorities. Would you care to explain that decision?" Colton took a deep breath. "Your Honor, I know I didn't follow the proper steps, and I apologize. At the time, I was only concerned about Sadie's safety and well-being. As soon as we established a stable routine, I sought to regularize everything." The judge observed him over his glasses, his face unreadable. "Miss Wells, in your professional opinion, does this initial irregularity compromise Mr. Mercer's capacity as a guardian?" Lauren stood. "No, Your Honor. In our multiple visits and assessments, it's clear Mr. Mercer always prioritized Sadie's welfare. He showed exceptional commitment to learning about parenting, adjusted his work schedule to be present, and created a safe, welcoming environment." The judge made some notes, then turned to Sadie. "Ms. Mitchell, I'd like to ask you some questions directly, if that's all right." Sadie looked at Colton, who nodded encouragingly, then back at the judge. "Yes, sir. How do you feel living with Mr. Mercer?" "Happy," Sadie said without hesitation. "He taught me how to ride a bike, and he makes pancakes in funny shapes for breakfast. And he never minds when I talk about the stars, even if I repeat the same things." A slight smile curved the judge's lips. "Do you feel safe there?" "Yes, very safe." Sadie straightened her shoulders. "When I have nightmares, he always comes to my room and stays until I fall asleep again. And when he has nightmares, I do the same." This detail wasn't in the reports, and Colton saw the judge's eyebrows lift. "I see. And would you like him to be your permanent guardian?" Sadie looked straight at the judge, with a seriousness beyond her years. "I'd like him to be my dad, forever." Silence filled the courtroom. Colton's heart pounded so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. The judge turned his attention back to the documents, flipping through a few pages. "Mr. Paxton, have all legal requirements been met? Background checks, financial evaluations, educational plans?" "Yes, Your Honor. All documents are in order, as detailed on pages 15 through 27 of the file." "I see," the judge said, adjusting his glasses. "I noticed there were extensive searches for any of the child's relatives, with no results." "Correct, Your Honor," Gregory added. "In fact, while conducting those searches, we discovered something interesting that wasn't in the initial records." Colton frowned, looking at his lawyer. This was new information to him as well. Gregory continued. "Upon checking past employment records of Sadie's mother, the late Mrs. Eleanor Mitchell, we found she worked for about 8 months as a cleaning staff member in Mr. Mercer's company 5 years ago." "What?" The word slipped out of Colton's mouth before he could contain it. The judge glanced at him. "Mr. Mercer, you weren't aware of this?" "No, Your Honor, not at all." Colton tried to process the information. "My company has hundreds of employees, and cleaning is outsourced. I didn't." "I understand," said the judge, watching his reaction. "Mr. Paxton, do you have evidence of this prior connection?" Gregory opened a folder. "Yes, Your Honor. Here are payment records from the janitorial service contracted by Mercer Enterprises between 2015 and 2016. Eleanor Mitchell is listed as assigned to the executive floor, where Mr. Mercer's office is located." The judge examined the documents, then looked at Colton and Sadie thoughtfully. "My mom worked there." Sadie's voice was small, surprised. Colton was still trying to absorb the news. Eleanor Mitchell. The name meant nothing to him. He tried to recall any face among the people who cleaned his office years ago. It was embarrassing to realize He'd probably never really looked at them. "That makes this all the more extraordinary," the judge commented, breaking the silence. "Your paths had crossed before, in a way," Lauren Wells spoke gently. "Sometimes the universe works in mysterious ways to connect people." Colton felt warm tears trickling down his face. The idea that Sadie's mother had once worked in his office, maybe passed him in the hallways, maybe even cleaned his desk when he wasn't there. And years later, by some inexplicable coincidence, her daughter would cross his path when they both needed it most. It was overwhelming. Judge Porter cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention back. "Well, after reviewing all documents, reports, and testimonies, I'm ready to give my decision." He looked directly at Colton and Sadie. "It is the opinion of this court that the best interests of the minor, Sadie Morgan Mitchell, will be served by granting permanent guardianship to Mr. Colton James Mercer." Sadie squeezed Colton's hand so tightly it almost hurt. "Mr. Mercer, are you prepared to assume full legal, financial, and emotional responsibility for Sadie's well-being?" "Yes, Your Honor," Colton replied, his voice trembling but sure. "I am." "Then," the judge finally smiled, "by the power vested in me by the state, I hereby finalize permanent guardianship. Congratulations to both of you." Sadie didn't wait another second. She leapt from her seat and threw herself into Colton's arms, who lifted her in a tight hug. Tears streamed freely down his face and hers. "We did it," Colton whispered into her hair. "We did it, Sadie." She pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. "So I'm really your daughter now?" For real and forever." Lauren, Gregory, and even the bailiff clapped quietly. Judge Porter, with a gentle smile, tapped his gavel one last time. "This hearing is adjourned, and if I may add a personal note, I have rarely seen a family so clearly meant to be together." 3 weeks later, Sadie was nervously adjusting a hairband with little planets attached. The 5th grade presentation on the solar system would start in 15 minutes, and she was playing the role of Saturn. "Do you think he's here yet?" she asked her new friend Maya, who was playing Jupiter. "Probably. My parents arrived half an hour early to get good seats." Sadie peeked through the auditorium curtain, trying to spot Colton among the nearly full seats. Her heart raced when she didn't see him immediately. "He promised he'd come," she muttered to herself. 5 minutes. Kids." Miss Hendricks, the science teacher, clapped her hands to get everyone's attention. "Positions, please." Sadie stole one last desperate glance at the audience. Then she saw him, hurrying in from the side aisle, obviously straight from work, still wearing his suit and tie. Colton scanned the seats for a spot, and Vikas, when their eyes met through the curtain gap, he smiled and waved. Only then did Sadie notice what he was carrying, a colorful sign folded under his arm. As he found a seat in the front row, he unfolded it. In bright, bold letters, it read, "Sadie, my favorite star." Something warm and glowing filled her chest, replacing all her stage nerves with a calm confidence. When the curtains opened and the stage lights came on, Sadie didn't feel afraid. When it was her turn to speak, she stepped forward, adjusted her planetary headband, and deviated slightly from the scripted lines, looking directly at Colton. "Saturn is a planet known for its beautiful rings," she recited as practiced. Then, with a small smile, she added, "Just like the stars, planets also need a place to call home. This is a story about a star that found hers." In the audience, Colton discreetly wiped away a tear and smiled back, his heart overflowing with a pride and love he never thought he would feel again. The universe, in its mysterious wisdom, had crossed their paths not just once, but twice. And this time, they would stay together, orbiting each other like stars in a constellation of their own. "Dad, your tie is crooked again." Colton glanced at his reflection in the mirror, while Sadie, standing on a little stool beside him, adjusted his emerald green tie. Her small fingers moved with surprising precision for a 9-year-old. "Better now?" he asked, turning so she could check. "Perfect," Sadie smiled, hopping down from the stool. "You look important." "You look important too," Colton said, admiring her floral dress with a pink bow that matched her new shoes. "Of course," she replied with mock gravity. "I'm Sadie from the Sadie Rose Institute." "Very important," Colton laughed, picking up the car keys. "No doubt, and we'll be late for your big opening if we don't leave now." On the drive to the old building on the outskirts of the city, Sadie filled the car with excited chatter about her responsibilities during the ceremony. She'd spent the whole week rehearsing her short speech, although Colton assured her she didn't have to speak if she didn't want to. "But I do," she insisted. "It's important." In the 8 months since the adoption was made official, Colton had watched Sadie blossom with awe. The shy, distrustful girl he'd met peering through the restaurant window was now a confident child, involved in school activities, making friends, and dreaming big for the future. More recently, after a conversation about kids who didn't get as lucky as she did, Sadie asked a question that changed everything. "Why can't we help other kids like me?" That simple question planted the seed which, fueled by Colton's dedication and Sadie's enthusiasm, had grown into the Sadie Rose Institute, opening its doors that very morning. By the time they arrived, the parking lot was almost full. Local reporters, city officials, potential donors, and, most importantly, families with children in need of support had all gathered. "Wow," Sadie whispered, taking in the crowd as they got out of the car. "That's a lot of people." "Nervous?" Colton asked, holding her hand. She took a deep breath, lifting her chin in a gesture that strongly resembled Eleanor Mitchell in the few photos Colton had managed to find of Sadie's mother. "A little, but a good kind of nervous." As they walked to the newly renovated building, Janet, now the Institute's executive coordinator, hurried over adjusting her blazer badge. "You're here," she said, relieved. "Everything's set. The mayor arrived early, the representatives from the Child Welfare Council are here, and the press is in position." Colton nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. He'd dedicated the past months to the project, redirecting significant resources from his company to create not just a temporary shelter, but a comprehensive center offering education, mental health services, and job training for older kids, along with an innovative family support program. "Where's Lauren?" Sadie asked, looking for the social worker who had become a family friend. "She's helping the kids get ready for their performance," Janet replied, pointing to a group of children practicing a song near the makeshift stage. When it was finally time for the ceremony, Colton sensed Sadie grip his hand tighter. He glanced down, noticing her biting her lip, another sign of her anxiety. "Hey," he said, crouching to her eye level, again, that comforting ritual. "Remember what we always say?" "One step at a time," she answered, giving a small smile. "Exactly. And we're taking this step together." The mayor kicked off the ceremony with a speech about the importance of private initiatives complementing public efforts. Then Lauren spoke about the reality faced by children in vulnerable situations. Finally, the MC announced, "And now, with great honor, I invite Mr. Colton Mercer, founder of the Sadie Rose Institute, and his daughter, Sadie Mercer, the inspiration behind this project, to the stage." As they walked up, Colton noticed Sadie was no longer displaying nerves. Instead, her face shone with a serene determination that made him proud. Colton adjusted the microphone and looked out at the audience. "Good morning, everyone. It is with immense joy that we open the Sadie Rose Institute today. But before I talk about the project itself, I need to briefly share how we got here." He recounted how, without excessive detail, how he met Sadie, a star who needed a home just as I needed a star to guide me. He spoke of how adopting her opened his eyes to the reality of so many other children who lacked the same luck. The Sadie Rose Institute was born with a mission to build bridges between children who need love and adults capable of offering it, between the child welfare system and the community, between a challenging present and a future full of possibilities. Colton explained the different programs they'd offer, from counseling to cultural and sports activities, from family support to adoption preparation. "Because no child," he concluded, "should ever be alone when there are so many hearts ready to love." When he finished, Colton stepped aside, giving Sadie a reassuring nod. A murmur of admiration spread as the little girl took her place at the microphone with surprising seriousness. "Hi," she began, her clear voice amplified. "My name is Sadie, and a year ago I didn't have a home, a family, or hope. The crowd fell silent. I'd lost my mom, who was the best person in the world, and I thought I'd never be happy again. But then, she looked at Colton with a smile that lit her entire face. I found someone who actually saw me. Really saw me. Not through me, like a lot of people do with kids, especially ones who are alone. Sadie paused briefly before continuing. Lots of kids like me are waiting for someone to look them in the eye, to see who they really are. Not just what they need or what they lack, but their dreams, their fears, their stories. This place, she gestured to the building behind them, will help those kids be seen until they find their own families, or until their families learn to see them better. Colton felt a lump in his throat as Sadie finished. Thank you for helping other kids be seen, just like I was. Applause broke out immediately, filled with emotion. Even the reporters, typically detached, seemed moved. Colton saw Lauren discreetly wiping a tear. It was time for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. A large pink ribbon stretched across the main entrance of the institute. Lauren handed Colton a giant pair of scissors decorated with colorful ribbons. I think you two should do this together, she said, winking at Sadie. Colton positioned himself behind Sadie, both holding the scissors. Cameras clicked all around as he whispered, "Ready to open the doors so more stories like ours can begin?" Sadie nodded, and together they cut the ribbon. More applause followed, but it was Sadie's spontaneous, unplanned words that stuck in everyone's minds. Now more kids can find a dad who actually looks them in the eye. And the rest of the day was a whirlwind of interviews, tours of the institute, chats with donors, and getting to know the first families who would benefit from the programs. Sadie stayed by Colton's side for a while, but soon joined a group of kids in the newly inaugurated play area. From his new office window at the institute, Colton watched Sadie showing other children how to braid a doll's hair. She seemed so natural with them, with no trace of the frightened girl she once was. She's amazing, Lauren commented, coming up beside him. You know, when we started this process, I had my doubts, right? Colton smiled. I figured it wasn't exactly an ideal situation. Not at all. But sometimes, she watched Sadie laugh with the other kids, the non-ideal turns out to be perfect. Later that evening, when they finally left the institute after a full day of celebration, both Colton and Sadie were exhausted, but in a good way. The kind of tiredness that follows accomplishment. On the drive home, Sadie suddenly asked, was it really hard? What was Sweetie? Building the institute. Colton thought for a moment. Not as hard as learning to do French braids, he joked, making her giggle. But yes, it took a lot of work. Worth it though, right? Yes. She fell silent, watching the city lights pass by through the car window. Maybe some girl like me will find a dad like you there. Maybe, Colton agreed. That's the hope. Dinner that night was simple, pizza delivery, a tradition after especially busy days. Sitting at the kitchen table, Colton and Sadie ate in companionable silence, the kind of quiet that only exists between people who are completely at ease with each other. What are you thinking about? Colton asked, noting Sadie's thoughtful look as she nibbled on a pepperoni slice. Do you think... She hesitated, twisting a strand of hair around her finger, another little habit that showed her deep thought. Do you think Margot and Ren can see us? And my mom too? The question caught Colton off guard, but not in a bad way. Over the past year, they had developed an open, honest way of talking about those who had passed away. Photos of Margot now shared wall space with photos of Eleanor Mitchell. The room once intended for Ren, and now Sadie's, retained Margot's original painted stars, accompanied by planets and comets, added by Sadie and Colton. I have no doubt, he replied softly. I think they're very proud of what we did today. Like stars, Sadie murmured, glancing toward the ceiling where, one floor above, her own room was decorated with dozens of glow-in-the-dark star stickers, exactly like stars. After dinner, Colton suggested a movie, but Sadie asked instead to play the board game they'd bought the previous week. Soon they were on the living room carpet, laughing and mock-arguing over the rules. That's cheating, Sadie exclaimed, giggling when Colton made an unexpected move. It's not cheating, it's advanced strategy, he countered, with an overly serious expression that made her laugh even more. The night wound down in the familiar dance of routines they'd built over the months. Hay bath, teeth brushed, the nightly choice of which book to read. This time it was Colton's turn. He picked one about space exploration, and finally, bedtime. Sadie's room, with its blend of items she had brought, her mother's favorite book he now carefully protected on a shelf, and new additions, her growing collection of astronomy books, was a visual testament to the journey they had shared. As he pulled the blanket around her, Colton noticed little Margot, the teddy bear Sadie still kept close at night. "Today was a big day," he said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "The best," Sadie agreed, her eyes heavy with sleep. "Dad?" "Yes." "Thank you for seeing me that day." Colton felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the one that started when Sadie first called him Dad and hadn't lessened since. "So I'm the one who should thank you for seeing me," he answered, kissing her forehead. "Good night, my star." "Good night, Dad." He turned off the light, leaving only the moon-shaped lamp glowing. The star stickers on the ceiling began to glimmer softly, transforming the room into a little private universe. Standing in the doorway, Colton watched Sadie as she drifted towards sleep. He remembered the first time he saw her, gazing through the restaurant window with hungry, hopeful eyes. The first night she stayed in his home, curled in the hallway recliner. How far they had come since then. There were still hard days, days when the absence of Margot and Wren hurt like an open wound, days when Sadie wept for the mother she had lost too soon, days when both stumbled, trying to learn how to be a family forged from shared loss. But they were overshadowed by good days, the mornings with odd-shaped pancakes, afternoons reading in the backyard shade, nights like this one under a ceiling of glow-in-the-dark stars. And as Colton gently closed her door, leaving it open a crack as Sadie preferred, he knew that, no matter what the future held, they had found something precious, a new beginning, a second chance, a home. Like an imaginary camera pulling away slowly, the image of the warmly lit house under the peaceful night sky told its own story, a story of losses turned into connections, of empty spaces filled not with replacements, but with new loves. A story of how sometimes broken people fit perfectly into each other's cracks, allowing growth where no one expected it. Love stayed. So did the girl. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.